Welcome to the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu and to another deep dive. Here we sift through complex ideas, dense books, and stacks of research, pulling out the most critical, mind shifting insights, all crafted specifically for you, our curious listener. Today we're diving deep into a topic that feels profoundly urgent, personal, and frankly pretty alarming for many of us parents, educators, young people. It's Jonathan Haidt's powerful and incredibly important book, The Anxious Generation. Our mission today is to really unpack the central claim of this book. We need to understand why a whole generation, specifically those born after 1995, seems to be experiencing unprecedented levels of anxiety and depression. It's a huge shift in mental well-being. And to help us grasp the gravity, Haidt opens with this really startling thought experiment. He calls it the Mars analogy. Just imagine this for a second. You get this opportunity to send your child to a new settlement on Mars. Apparently, her school performance and even a genetic analysis, which, hang on, you never agreed to have secured her a spot. She signed up herself without telling you. She loves space, sure, but the bigger pull, all her friends are going. And she's begging you, absolutely begging to let her go too. So before you just blurt out, no way, you decide to learn a bit more. You find out they're recruiting kids specifically because, well, their developing bodies adapt better to Mars' low gravity. The theory is if they go through puberty there, their bodies will be, permanently tailored to Mars. But here's the really chilling part. It's completely unknown if these Mars-adapted children could ever actually return to Earth, function normally, I mean. And then it gets worse. You learn about the radiation. Earth has this magnetic shield, protects us, right? Mars doesn't. So way more harmful particles would be bombarding your daughter's developing DNA. The planners base the radiation shields on adult astronauts who face a slightly higher cancer risk after a year. But kids, their cells are developing so much faster, they're at an even higher risk. So would you let her go? Of course not. It sounds insane, right? An unchecked, ethically questionable venture. And the company doesn't even need your consent. As long as the kid checks a box, boom, one-way ticket. Haidt argues that, metaphorically speaking, we've done something shockingly similar to our children with what he calls the great rewiring of childhood.
That analogy is, wow. It's incredibly potent, isn't it? It just forces you immediately to confront the scale, the almost unthinkable nature of the shift Haidt is talking about. And for listeners maybe not familiar with him, Jonathan Haidt is a very distinguished social psychologist. He's known for really insightful research into morality, emotion, culture. You might know his previous books, The Happiness Hypothesis, The Righteous Mind, maybe The Coddling of the American Mind, which he co-authored. Really influential work. Now, in The Anxious Generation, he's focusing squarely on Gen Z, basically, people born after 1995. And he argues these young people, they're essentially the test subjects of this radically different way of growing up. It's completely unlike any generation before them. The book's core idea, its thesis, really zeroes in on two major, interconnected, and ultimately, he argues, disastrous shifts in childhood that slammed together in the early 2010s. And these shifts are driving the mental health crisis we see.
Okay, that phrase, the great rewiring, it sounds huge. What's the biggest misunderstanding people might have about it? How does Haidt really define this shift?
Yeah, that's a good question. A common misconception is thinking it's just about screen time. Kids spending too much time looking at screens. But Haidt argues it's much, much deeper than that. He pinpoints the start of this anxious generation to a really critical period around 2009. And it wasn't just screens appearing. It was a powerful technological convergence. Think about it. High-speed broadband spreading rapidly through the 2000s, making constant connection normal. Then bam, the iPhone arrives in 2007. Suddenly, there's this powerful internet-connected computer in everyone's pocket. And crucially, this is the moment social media became, well, hyper-viralized. That really kicked off around 2009 with things like the like button, the retweet or share button. Seemingly small changes, right? But they fundamentally altered online social dynamics. It shifted from just connecting with friends to this constant performance, this endless hunt for validation.
Wow. Okay. And you mentioned Jean Twenz's work supporting this.
Exactly. Her research is groundbreaking. She shows that what truly shapes generations isn't just big historical events, wars, depressions, that kind of thing. It's the fundamental changes in the technologies they use during their formative years. So Gen Z isn't defined by experiencing combat or a massive financial crash, like maybe millennials partly were. They're defined by this radical shift in their daily environment, their basic experience of growing up. It's the tech.
So if the technology convergence is the kind of the kindling, what are these two distinct plot lines, as Haidt calls them, that really ignited the crisis?
Excellent question. He identifies these two simultaneous, really tragic plot lines. First is overprotection in the real world, starting back in the 80s, but really accelerating in the 90s and 2000s. Free play, that and unstructured, unsupervised outdoor time, many of us remember, it just plummeted. This was driven largely by adult fears, amplified by the whole stranger danger narrative, which we know is well-intentioned.
Sure.
But it led to drastically less unsupervised outdoor time. Parents wanted to shield kids from perceived dangers, but in doing so, they accidentally removed these really vital developmental experiences. Playgrounds got safer, or maybe too safe, and kids exploring on their own became super rare.
Okay, that's plot line one. Overprotection outside. What's the second?
The second, equally disastrous plotline, is underprotection in the virtual world. So while parents were, bubble wrapping kids in the physical world, they were often, without really knowing it, granting them total independence online. In a world they didn't fully grasp, this exposed kids, minors, to adult content, unmonitored interactions with adults, and harms that were actually far more common and pervasive than the rare dangers outside. Kids' social lives, their free time, it just increasingly migrated onto these internet-connected devices, a huge, unregulated move.
So the core of Haidt's argument, then, is that it's these two simultaneous trends, this sort of smothering overprotection physically and the wide-open, dangerous underprotection digitally that are the main reasons Gen Z struggles so much with anxiety and depression. It's like a pincer movement.
Exactly. A pincer movement is a good way to put it. And to really understand the impact, Haidt draws this stark contrast between the real world and the virtual world, how different they are, and how that impacts development. Think about the real world. Our interactions are embodied, right? We use our bodies, facial expressions, gestures. We're reacting to people's physical presence, consciously or not. There's synchronous happening in real time. You have to take turns, give immediate feedback. Communication is usually one-to-one or maybe one-to-few. It's focused, direct. And, this is key, there's a high bar for entering and leaving communities. Relationships take work. You're motivated to repair problems because just walking away has real social costs. You have to learn to sort things out.
Okay, that makes sense. Real world, embodied, synchronous, high stakes for relationships. What about the virtual?
The virtual world is almost the opposite. It's largely disembodied, mostly text. Your interaction partner could even be an AI eventually. It's heavily asynchronous. You can reply hours later. Conversations get fragmented. Communication is often one-to-many, broadcasting to potentially huge audiences, performance, remember? And critically, there's a low bar for entry and exit. Block someone, leave a group, click, done. Relationships can feel disposable, less investment needed.
Ah, I see. So the implication is...
The implication is profound.
Yep.
Children raised primarily in these shifting virtual networks, maybe using fake names, able to just bail on interactions easily. They're far less likely to learn those essential social and emotional skills, the grit you need for real life. If you can always just block someone when things get uncomfortable, you don't practice conflict resolution. You don't learn empathy through friction. You don't learn emotional repair. You avoid managing real-world social awkwardness instead of learning from it.
The data Haidt shows on the mental health plunge is just staggering. You see these graphs and the lines for anxiety and depression just shoot up around 2010, 2012, especially for teens. But some people might still say, well, what about other things happening in the world? Economic problems, scary news. How does Haidt respond to those alternative ideas?
He addresses them very directly, mainly by looking at the timing. That's crucial. So the generation disaster idea, blaming 9/11 or the 2008 financial crisis, well, millennials lived through those during their teen years. But their mental health rates didn't suddenly spike upwards like Gen Z's did later. The timing doesn't fit.
Right.
Then, economic hardship. If that was the main driver, you'd expect mental health to tank around 2009 during the worst of the recession.
That makes sense.
But it didn't. The rates started climbing during the 2010s, precisely when the U.S. economy was recovering, unemployment was falling, the stock market was rising. So the trend actually goes against the economic hardship explanation.
Okay, so economics is unlikely to be the primary cause. What about something like climate change anxiety? That feels very real for young people. It absolutely is real and a huge concern. But Haidt points out something interesting from historical data. Impending national threats, things like wars or major crises faced collectively, they actually tend to reduce mental illness rates.
Really?
People often pull together. There's a stronger sense of purpose, unity. Suicide rates sometimes even drop during wartime. Depression typically arises more from feeling isolated, lonely. Useless.
Which is exactly what Haidt argues the Great Rewiring created.
Precisely, that sense of disconnection and lack of real-world contribution. And what really drives the point home is that this isn't just happening in the US, it's global, right?
Absolutely. That's one of the strongest pieces of evidence. You see similar sharp declines in adolescent mental health. More anxiety, depression, self-harm, even suicide rates rising, happening simultaneously across the Anglosphere. That's the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And it's not just English-speaking countries. You see similar patterns with similar timing in Nordic countries too. Despite very different cultures, economies, social safety nets, this strongly suggests a common cause, something global that hit all these places around the same time.
Sure.
And the most plausible candidate, the rapid, widespread adoption of smartphones and social media platforms around that early 2010s period.
Okay, so we've established the what and the why. Let's dig deeper now into the how. How exactly does this phone-based childhood interfere with development? What are the specific mechanisms Haidt identifies, starting with play?
Right. Let's dive into the loss of play and attunement. This is foundational. People like Peter Gray, a developmental psychologist, stress that play isn't just fun, it's literally the work of childhood. It's how the brain gets wired correctly. Through play, especially free play, kids learn vital social skills. Resolving conflicts, managing emotions, taking turns, cooperation. It's a low-stakes lab for trial and error. You mess up, you learn, you try again. Gray specifically points out that play teaches kids to suppress the urge to dominate, which allows them to form cooperative bonds. Without enough play, kids can struggle with social awkwardness and anxiety later on because they just haven't had the practice.
And smartphones get in the way of this practice.
Massively. Haidt calls them experience blockers. He uses this really vivid cuckoo bird analogy. You know how a cuckoo chick pushes the host bird's eggs out of the nest?
Yeah, so it gets all the food.
Exactly. Smartphones do the same thing to other activities. They're so engrossing, so rewarding, they push out things like face-to-face play, reading, hobbies, even just boredom, which can spark creativity. Think of his other analogy, watching an iPad loaded with movies about walking. You can watch endless videos, but you won't learn to walk without actually doing it. Information isn't practice, active engagement, play. That's what shapes the brain.
And it's not just blocking play, it's blocking connection with parents too, this attunement idea.
Yes, absolutely. Attunement is that crucial back and forth, the serve and return interaction between babies, kids, and their caregivers. The eye contact, the babbling, the shared smiles, the little games. These interactions are fundamental for developing social skills, timing, emotional regulation, and that deep, secure bond. But think about how often parents are distracted by their own phones now. That Pew Research stat is jarring. 62% of kids aged 6-12 said their parents were often distracted by their phones when they tried to talk. That constant distraction, even if unintentional, creates a sense of loneliness in kids. They feel like they're competing with a device for their parents' attention. They're starved for that genuine, focused connection.
And then there's the whole social learning aspect being hijacked.
Hijacked is a good word for it. Humans evolved these powerful biases for learning from others. There's a conformist bias. We tend to copy what most people are doing. And a prestige bias. We copy successful or high-status individuals. Social media platforms designed purely for engagement are basically the most efficient conformity engines ever invented. They bombard kids with thousands of data points every hour, likes, comments, shares, views. This constant feedback loop shapes their behavior, their values, their sense of self, based on what algorithms and influencers deem popular or prestigious. It often completely drowns out the slower, more nuanced influence of family, teachers, local community culture. Kids are learning what matters from the internet, not necessarily from the people closest to them.
This ties into another core concept Haidt discusses. These two modes our brains operate in: discover and defend. Can you unpack that?
Sure. Think of it as two basic settings for navigating the world. Our behavioral activation system, BAS, pushes us into discover mode. This switches on when you spot opportunities like finding food, meeting a potential friend. You feel positive, curious, eager to explore and learn. Then there's the behavioral inhibition system, BIS, which activates defend mode. This scans for threats, makes you cautious, wary, maybe anxious, tells you to hold back, assess risk. Both modes are essential, obviously. But the problem arises when kids get stuck in defend mode due to chronic wariness or anxiety. That state fundamentally hinders learning, exploration, and growth.
And overprotective parenting can actually push kids into that defend mode.
Paradoxically, yes. Coddling, as Haidt and Lukianoff called it in their previous book, refers to those well-intentioned efforts to shield kids from every frustration, every scrape, every negative feeling. Research correlates this kind of parenting with higher rates of anxiety later on, lower self-efficacy, that belief you can handle things yourself, and more difficulty adjusting to challenges like college. Haidt uses the analogy of trees needing wind. The stress of the wind forces the tree to grow stronger roots and a thicker trunk. Kids are similar. They need to face manageable challenges and setbacks to develop resilience.
Which connects to that idea of kids being anti-fragile.
Exactly. It's a term from Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Antifragile isn't just resilient bouncing back. It means you actually get stronger from shocks and stressors, up to a point, of course. Children need the minor injuries, the social bumps and bruises that happen in unsupervised play to develop their internal psychological immune system. They learn risk assessment, body control, social negotiation through those small failures and recoveries.
He gives the example of playgrounds changing, right?
Yeah, it's a great illustration. Think of those old school metal merry-go-rounds, the spinners.
Yeah.
You could get dizzy, maybe scrape an elbow, but you learned quickly how fast you could go, how to hold on, immediate feedback, learning control.
Right, I remember those. Definitely some minor injuries happened.
For sure. But contrast that with many modern playgrounds, designed to be overly safe. They often remove any element of manageable risk, offering fewer opportunities for kids to test their limits and learn safety skills independently. Researchers like Mariana Brusoni argue for more risk in play environments. Her motto is, keep them as safe as necessary, not as safe as possible. Her work shows that kids who engage in risky outdoor play are actually healthier, more resilient, and better at managing risks overall.
And it's just so ironic, this contrast Haidt points out. We're terrified of rare dangers like abduction,
Extremely rare statistically.
while letting kids roam free in the online world where actual predators are demonstrably active.
It's a tragic misplacement of fear. The internet has unfortunately made it incredibly easy for predators to contact children and share illegal material. That 2019 New York Times report citing 45 million flagged illegal images is horrifying. And the Wall Street Journal expose on Instagram's algorithms connecting predators. It's deeply disturbing. Isabel Hogbin's essay perfectly captures this. She's 10, finds Pornhub easily, no checks. Meanwhile, her mom is focused on making sure she eats enough different colored vegetables.
Right. Total disconnect.
It shows where our protective anxieties have been focused versus where the actual prevalent dangers often lie. Haidt's point is stark. If you truly want to keep kids safe, delay their entry into the virtual world and get them playing outside in the real one more.
This also feeds into that idea of concept creep, doesn't it? The meaning of safety itself changing?
Precisely. The psychologist Nick Haslam identified this. Safety used to mean almost exclusively physical safety, freedom from bodily harm. But over the last few decades, especially from the 80s to 2010s, the use of emotional safety exploded. It increased by like 600%. While the intention might be good, this expansion can lead to young people feeling unable to cope with normal life challenges, disagreements, criticism, discomfort, because these are now framed as threats to their safety. It inadvertently teaches fragility instead of resilience.
And how does the attachment system fit in here, the secure base idea?
Attachment theory is key. Children need a secure base, a reliable, loving caregiver to feel safe enough to explore the world. The pattern is explore, encounter something tricky or scary, retreat to the secure base for comfort, regulate, then go back out and explore again. Overprotection disrupts this cycle. Either the parent is too anxious to let the child explore freely, or they rush in to solve every problem, preventing the child from learning to manage challenges and return to base independently. It keeps the child tethered, stuck in defend mode, afraid to launch.
Okay, so all these factors, less play, less attunement, hijacked social learning, overprotection, underprotection, they all converge during puberty. Haidt calls this a sensitive period, almost like a blocked transition to adulthood. What's happening in the brain then?
Puberty is a period of massive brain plasticity, second only to early childhood. The brain isn't really growing much bigger, but it's undergoing this huge rewiring. Think of it like pruning a rose bush. Unused connections, neurons and synapses, get pruned away, while frequently used pathways get strengthened and myelinated, making them faster and more efficient. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So the experiences a teen has during these years, the things they spend their time doing, thinking about, focusing on, literally sculpt their brain for the long term. If they spend hours scrolling social media, playing immersive video games, that's what gets wired in deeply. Haidt uses the analogy of setting cement. Try to write your name in wet cement, it vanishes. Try when it's fully dry, you can't make a mark. But during that crucial hardening phase, your mark is permanent. Puberty is that critical phase of the brain.
So smartphones become experience blockers, again here, but maybe with even higher stakes during puberty.
Exactly, because the brain is so malleable. These digital devices, with their constant dopamine hits and easy engagement, crowd out other activities that are crucial for adolescent brain development. Things like complex problem solving, deep reading, face-to-face social negotiation, mastering a skill through effortful practice. The phone essentially blocks the experiences that would build a more robust, resilient, and capable adult brain. The cuckoo is kicking even more important eggs out of the nest during this sensitive period.
And this is happening at a time when traditional markers of adulthood are disappearing.
Yes, the loss of rites of passage. Historically, societies had clear rituals marking the transition from childhood to adulthood. Think bar mitzvahs, quinceañeras, vision quests, apprenticeships. These usually involve phases. Separation from childhood, a challenging transition guided by elders, not parents, and then reincorporation into the community as a young adult with new responsibilities and privileges. Modern, secular Western societies have largely lost these clear, shared milestones. So adolescents are often left feeling adrift, trying to figure out what adulthood even means, often getting their cues from a confusing and unrealistic online world rather than their community.
This really resonates with the approach of the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu, focusing on clear steps and paths. Haidt actually proposes some new modern rites of passage, doesn't he? What do those look like?
He does, and it's a fascinating attempt to reintroduce structure. He suggests focusing on even-numbered birthdays from 6 to 18, linking them to specific new freedoms and responsibilities, maybe tied to allowance increases. For example, age 6, the age of family responsibility. They're formally recognized as contributors, have chores, get a small allowance. Age 8, the age of local freedom, maybe playing unsupervised nearby, running small errands, possibly getting a very basic kid phone just for calling parents.
Okay.
Age 10, the age of roaming more widely, using good judgment, maybe a flip phone with no internet. Crucially, needing time just to hang out with friends, not always in adult structured activities. Age 14, high school starts, a big jump in independence, academics, social pressure. Haidt sees this as a reasonable target for a national norm, not a law for getting that first smartphone.
Interesting. So providing clear rungs on the ladder.
Exactly. He stresses these are just ideas to start a conversation. Things will vary. But the core point is, we shouldn't just remove all the common milestones and leave kids to figure it all out alone. These proposed steps could bring back some much-needed structure.
All right, so we understand the backdrop. Now let's get to the really direct impacts. Haidt outlines 4 foundational harms of phone-based childhood. What are they?
Okay, these are critical. Harm, #1. Social deprivation. It sounds counterintuitive with social media, but teens are spending drastically less time with friends face-to-face. The data shows a sharp drop after 2009. And it's not just quantity. Even when they are together, if phones are present, the quality of interaction tanks. Research shows it reduces intimacy, trust, empathy. It sends that constant, low-level signal that people on my phone might be more interesting than you are right now.
Ouch.
Yeah. And it happens in families too, as we mentioned with that parent distraction statistic. It creates this chronic sense of being secondary, inhibiting real connection.
Okay, social deprivation. What's number 2?
Harm, #2. Sleep deprivation. This is a huge one, with clear causal links. Using smartphones, especially near bedtime, messes with sleep. Blue light suppresses melatonin. The content is stimulating. Notifications interrupt sleep. Longitudinal studies confirm it. Increased smartphone use leads to sleep problems, not the other way around. And the consequences of chronic sleep deprivation are massive. Higher rates of depression, anxiety, irritability, cognitive problems, poor learning, lower grades, more accidents. It undermines basically everything.
Makes sense. Harm number 3.
Harm, #3. Attention fragmentation. Our ability to focus, control impulses, resist distractions, what psychologists call executive function, is developed over time, particularly in the frontal cortex. Constant notifications, multitasking, switching between screens, this fire hose of stimuli actively interferes with that development. Heavy smartphone users consistently perform worse on tests of attention and cognitive control. This is especially true for younger adolescents whose brains are still rapidly developing. It makes deep thinking and focused learning incredibly difficult. You see it reflected in declining test scores. The brain is basically being trained for distraction.
That's worrying. And the final harm.
Harm, #4. Addiction. This goes back to basic learning principles, like Thorndike's cat's learning through rewarded actions, the wearing smooth of a path in the brain. Touchscreens and apps are expertly designed to exploit our dopamine system. Dopamine isn't really about pleasure or liking. It's about wanting, motivation, seeking. Apps use techniques like Variable ratio reinforcement schedules, unpredictable rewards, just like slot machines to keep us hooked. Constantly checking, scrolling, seeking that next little hit.
Like gambling mechanics applied to social interaction.
Exactly. And many app designers were explicitly taught these techniques, drawing on behaviorist psychology used for animal training. B.J. Fogg's lab at Stanford was influential here. When heavy users try to cut back, they often experience real withdrawal symptoms. Anxiety, irritability, insomnia, feeling down. It ticks all the boxes for a behavioral addiction.
These four harms, social deprivation, sleep loss, fragmented attention, addiction, they sound like they affect everyone. But Haidt makes a strong case that social media, in particular, harms girls more than boys. Why is that?
You're right, boys are definitely affected. But the data does show a consistently larger and more significant negative link between heavy social media use and mental illness for girls. The correlation for anxiety and depression is quite substantial, around RE.15. And crucially, experiments confirm it's causal. Reducing social media improves well-being, exposure to idealized images hurts body image. Haidt identifies four main reasons for this gender disparity.
Okay, what's the first one?
Reason 1. Social comparison. Girls, on average, tend to be more sensitive to social comparison than status. Social media platforms are basically comparison machines. Girls are bombarded with these carefully curated, filtered highlight reels of peers' lives, plus impossible beauty standards pushed by algorithms and influencers. Haidt mentions that scary example of TikTok pushing corpse bride diet content to young teens.
Oh, God.
Yeah. This constant upward comparison lowers girls' internal sociometers, their sense of social value and belonging, leading directly to more anxiety and depression. They feel like they can never measure up.
That makes sense. Reason 2.
Reason 2. Relational aggression. While boys tend towards more physical aggression, girls are more likely to engage in relational aggression, things like gossip, rumor spreading, social exclusion, damaging reputations. As social life moved online, studies show cyberbullying went up for girls, but actually went down slightly for boys. Social media provides the perfect platform for this kind of aggression. It can be anonymous, it spreads rapidly, and it's inescapable. It follows them home into their bedrooms 204/7.
Okay, comparison and aggression. What's number 3?
Reason 3. Sociogenic illness. This is the idea that emotional states, especially negative ones like anxiety and depression, can be contagious. Research suggests these emotions spread more effectively through female social networks. Social media acts like an incubator, amplifying and spreading these states, sometimes leading to what look like mass social media-induced illnesses. Haidt gives some really striking examples. The sudden surge in teens, mostly girls, presenting with Tourette's-like tics after watching TikTok influencers who had tics, or the rise in dissociative identity disorder, DID diagnoses, again mainly among adolescent girls, seemingly influenced by online portrayals.
Oh, wow.
He also notes the rapid rise in gender dysphoria diagnoses, specifically among natal females and Gen Z, might be related to social contagion effects online, though that's a complex and sensitive area.
And the fourth reason?
Reason 4. Sexual predators. Simply put, girls are disproportionately targeted by online sexual predators. The nature of the platforms and the behavior patterns make them more vulnerable to unwanted contact, grooming, and exploitation. This constant background threat forces girls into defend mode more often, contributing to their overall anxiety levels. And the terrible irony through all this is that despite being called social media, heavy use consistently correlates with feeling more lonely. Teens report having fewer close friends and higher rates of loneliness across the board since this rewiring began.
So while girls are hit hard by the social dynamics online, boys have their own set of struggles, maybe more related to disengagement from the real world.
Exactly. Boys show signs of checking out from the real world even earlier in some ways. Agreement with statements like, "people like me don't have much chance for a successful life," has risen sharply among boys. Richard Reeves, in his book of Boys and Men, talks about structural factors. The economy shifting away from rewarding physical labor, schools maybe not being ideally suited to boys' learning styles, fewer positive male role models, fewer dads in the home. These are big societal issues. Haidt adds 2 key psychological factors from the Great Rewiring. First, safetyism arguably hit boys harder. They naturally engage in more rough-and-tumble, risky play. When that got curtailed, they lost more of something vital to their development. Second, the pull of online gaming, especially multiplayer games from the late 2000s and then smartphones, was incredibly strong for boys. It offered challenge, camaraderie, status things maybe harder to find in the overly structured, risk-averse real world. Many boys just got swallowed whole by the virtual world.
So the virtual world kind of stepped in to fill a void for boys.
In many ways, yes. Video games, starting way back, offered agency, skill building, friendships. As real-world opportunities for unsupervised adventure shrank, the virtual world became increasingly appealing, an alternative reality where they could feel competent and connected, albeit digitally. But this came with its own dangers, particularly pornography. The internet created this infinite, free, easily accessible supply of high-novelty porn. That Swedish study showing daily porn use jumping from 11% to 24% among boys in just a decade is alarming.
What are the consequences of that?
Addiction is a major one, but also choosing easy virtual gratification over the complexities and risks of real-world dating. Research shows porn consumption can reduce satisfaction in real relationships and even decrease attraction to real partners. It rewires sexual expectations and responses.
So different paths for boys and girls, but Haidt argues they end up in a similar place.
Yes, a place of anomie and meaninglessness. Anomie is that sociological term for a state of normlessness, where social bonds are weak and shared values break down. Haidt argues that the unstable, constantly shifting nature of online networks prevents the formation of stable moral communities and identities. Whether through the anxieties of social media or the withdrawal into gaming and porn, both boys and girls end up feeling disconnected, adrift, and lacking a sense of purpose. He uses the example of Luca, that Italian teenager who became a hikikomori, a social recluse, finding freedom only in his room, online, using the internet to simulate life without facing its anxieties. It highlights that deep withdrawal some boys experience.
This goes beyond just diagnosable mental illness, then. Haidt talks about a kind of spiritual degradation affecting everyone. What does he mean by that?
Yeah, this is a really profound part of the argument. He suggests we perceive social reality with a sort of vertical dimension, what he calls the divinity dimension. We feel elevated, lifted up by acts of kindness, beauty, courage, and we feel pulled down, degraded by acts of cruelty or vulgarity. His argument is that the overall environment of our phone-based lives tends to pull us downward on this dimension. It causes a subtle but pervasive spiritual harm, even for adults who aren't clinically anxious or depressed, a vague sense that things are coarser, less meaningful.
He uses Durkheim's ideas of the sacred and profane here.
Exactly. Emile Durkheim, the sociologist, talked about how religions create sacred times, like a Sabbath, places, a church, a mosque, objects, scriptures. These are set apart from ordinary life. They're profane. These sacred things facilitate collective effervescence, shared rituals that bind communities and lift people into a shared emotional and moral space. The virtual world, Haidt argues, is almost entirely profane. It collapses time and space into this undifferentiated blur. Nothing is set apart. Everything is available 247. Virtual communities can offer connection, sure, but often lack that deep, soul-nourishing quality of real-world, embodied, synchronous collective experiences.
And social media actively works against spirituality by keeping us self-focused.
Yes, that's the self-transcendence point. A key feature of spiritual experience across cultures is quieting the self, feeling connected to something larger. Neurologically, this often involves reduced activity in the default mode network, DMN, the brain's me-centered network. Social media, Haidt says, is almost perfectly designed to keep the DMN hyperactive. It's all about self-presentation, managing your profile, worrying about likes, comparing yourself to others. It keeps us locked in the self, making those moments of transcendence much harder to reach.
It also seems to make us more judgmental.
Definitely. Most wisdom traditions preach compassion, forgiveness, less judgment. Judge not, lest ye be judged, right? But social media platforms thrive on quick, often harsh judgments. Outrage gets clicks. We react instantly. Emotionally, moral psychology tells us intuitions come first, strategic reasoning second, and then we find reasons to justify our snap judgment. The platforms encourage being too quick to anger and too slow to forgive.
So what's an antidote to this spiritual degradation?
One powerful, universal antidote Haidt highlights is awe in nature. Experiencing something vast, beautiful, overwhelming it reliably induces awe. And awe is a prime route to self-transcendence. Studies show that experiencing awe, like going for an awe walk, actually diminishes self-focus, increases feelings of connection and pro-social behavior, and boosts well-being. It pulls you out of your own head. It counteracts the anxiety and self-consciousness fostered by the phone-based world. Ultimately, as the ancients knew, we are what we think, or maybe we are what we attend to. If our attention is constantly hijacked by algorithms feeding us often degrading content, our inner lives suffer. We need, as Haidt puts it, to take back control of our inputs.
Okay, wow. We've really unpacked the problem in detail.
Yeah.
Feels heavy. But the crucial message, and this is where it gets empowering, is that we are not helpless. Haidt is actually very optimistic about our ability to change course.
He really is. That's a vital part of the book. The feeling that it's too late, that the genie is out of the bottle, he argues that's just a perception, a feeling of collective helplessness. He uses the analogy of recalling a dangerous product. When the Titanic sank, they didn't just say, oh, well, ship sank. They immediately recalled its sister ships and retrofitted them with more lifeboats and double hulls. We found out the phone-based childhood was dangerous, especially for kids. We can recall it and make it safer.
But it's hard for one parent, one family to act alone, right? The social pressure is immense.
Absolutely. That's the classic collective action problem or social dilemma. If all your kids' friends are getting smartphones in 6th grade, holding yours back until 8th or later feels incredibly costly, socially isolating for your child. So everyone does what seems best for their own kid in the short term, even if they suspect it's bad overall, and the collective result is negative for everyone. But the key is, if we coordinate, if we act together, the cost for each individual plummets. Suddenly, your kid isn't the only one without a phone.
So how do we coordinate? What are the paths forward?
Haidt outlines 4 main ways to tackle collective action problems. 1. Voluntary coordination. Groups like parents getting together and agreeing on norms, like the Wait Until 8th pledge. 2. Legislation regulation. Government stepping in to set rules. 3. Changing default settings. Tech companies making their products safer by default for kids. 4. Cultural change. Shifting broader societal norms and expectations around childhood and technology. And he gives a big shout out here to his collaborator, Lenore Skenazy, the founder of Free Range Kids and Let Grow. Her whole focus is on making it easy, normal, and legal for parents to give kids back the independence they need. So the solutions are practical, collective, and aimed right at you, the listener, to participate in.
This is where the 1-hour guide by Anil Nasu really connects, providing those practical steps for change at a systemic level. What should governments and tech companies be doing, according to Haidt?
The core issue they need to tackle is that race to the bottom of the brainstem. Companies are financially incentivized to hook users young and keep them engaged for as long as possible, often using these addictive design techniques.
Right, the infinite scroll, the autoplay, the streaks.
Exactly. They're designed to bypass rational thought and hook our basic impulses. So, Haidt proposes 4 key government tech actions. 1. Assert a duty of care. Pass laws like the UK's Age-Appropriate Design Code, AADC. This basically says tech companies have a legal responsibility to design their services with children's best interests in mind. Things like defaulting kids' accounts to private, turning off location tracking, not using manipulative design.
Makes sense. Put safety over engagement for kids.
2. Raise the age of internet adulthood to 16. COPA in the U.S. sets it at 13. That's just too young developmentally, especially considering the onset of puberty and vulnerability. Haidt argues 16 is a much more sensible age for kids to legally consent to complex terms of service and data collection. It gets them past that peak vulnerability window, around 11-13 for girls, 14-15 for boys.
Okay, 16 for online adulthood. What else?
3. Facilitate age verification. Now, this isn't about government IDs for everyone online. That's a privacy nightmare. Haidt suggests device-based verification. Parents could easily mark a child's phone or tablet as belonging to a minor.
How would that work?
The device itself would signal to websites and apps, this user is underage. Apply your age restrictions or get parental consent. This allows age gating without collecting massive amounts of personal data centrally. It helps parents enforce limits, reduces peer pressure, since kids can't just easily lie about their age everywhere, and doesn't really inconvenience adults.
That sounds clever. And number 4.
4. Encourage phone-free schools. Governments can help schools make this happen by providing funds for things like phone lockers or those Yonder-style lockable pouches, making it easier for schools to get phones completely out of the learning environment during the school day.
And what about the real world? What can governments do to make that more inviting for kids again?
Good point. It's not just about restricting the virtual, but enriching the real. Haidt suggests. 1. Reasonable childhood independence laws. Clarify ambiguous child neglect laws. Make it clear that letting your kid walk to the park alone or wait briefly in the car, assuming they're old enough and it's safe, is not neglect. Protect parents who grant age-appropriate freedom.
Right, reduce the fear of being reported for normal parenting.
Encourage more play in schools. Mandate more recess time, even for older kids. Make sure it happens before lunch. Kids eat better and behave better after running around. And stop using recess withdrawal as a punishment. It's essential for development. 3. Design and zone public space with children in mind. Build cities for people, not just cars. More sidewalks, safe crossings, bike lanes, traffic calming, mixed-use zoning so shops, parks, friends are within walking, biking distance. And things like school streets, closing streets near schools at drop-off pickup, or play streets, temporary street closures for block parties and play. Make the physical environment itself more conducive to independent and spontaneous fun.
Okay, that's a strong agenda for governments. What about schools? If I'm a teacher or principal listening, what are the most impactful things we can do? Haidt seems very focused on prevention here.
Absolutely. His message to schools is clear. Stop playing whack-a-mole with the downstream consequences, anxiety, cyberbullying, distraction, and tackle the upstream cause. The number one recommendation: 1. Go phone-free. Implement a comprehensive ban on personal phones during the entire school day, not just put it away in class. Phones should be off and out of sight in lockers, in pouches from the first bell to the last.
Has this been tried? Does it work?
Yes. He highlights Mountain Middle School in Colorado, which went phone-free way back in 2012. The principal described the transformation as incredible. Kids started talking to each other again in the hallways, interacting with teachers. The whole vibe changed. Cyberbullying plummeted. And global bodies like UNESCO are now recommending it, citing evidence that phones disrupt learning and offer little proven educational benefit in most classroom settings. Even tech execs often choose phone-free schools for their own kids. Plus, the timing of declining test scores like NAEP since smartphones became ubiquitous is highly suggestive.
Okay, phone-free schools. What else? Bringing back play.
Yes, schools need to become playful again. This means longer recess, more unstructured time outside, even for middle schoolers, and ideally before lunch. Play club, an after-school option maybe a few times a week, with mixed ages and loose parts, balls, boxes, chalk, stuff kids can use creatively. Minimal supervision, like a lifeguard model. That principal in Ohio, Kevin, saw amazing results. Huge drops in truancy and discipline issues. Kids happier, kinder, more social. It shows how powerful unstructured play is. It's a fantastic one-hour guide by Anel Nathu, kind of practical example.
That sounds great. What about the Let Grow project?
3. Assign the Let Grow project. This is brilliant. It's a simple homework assignment. Go home and do something new on your own that you and your parents agree on. Walk the dog alone, run an errand, cook a simple meal. It builds real competence, confidence, independence, and even empathy as kids navigate the world a bit by themselves. Haidt's own son's experience hailing a cab alone shows how these small steps build self-reliance.
And specifically for boys.
4. Re-engage boys. Schools can actively try to hire more male teachers, especially in elementary grades where they're really underrepresented. Positive male role models matter. And support vocational training, career and technical education, CTE. These hands-on pathways often connect better with boys' interests and learning styles.
Okay, now for the advice that hits closest to home for many listeners, parents. Haidt talks about shifting from a carpenter to a gardener mindset. What's the difference?
It's a beautiful analogy. The carpenter parent tries to meticulously shape and mold their child into a specific predetermined outcome. Lots of control, precision, focus on the end product. The gardener parent instead focuses on creating the right conditions, the rich soil, the sunlight, the water, protection from serious harm, and then trusts the child, the plant, to grow in their own unique, perhaps unpredictable way. It embraces the messiness and trusts the natural developmental process. Your job is to provide the environment, then step back and nurture, not micromanage.
So practically, what does being a gardener look like at different ages?
Haidt gives clear, age-specific advice, very much in the spirit of actionable strategies. For parents of young children, ages 0 to 5, more real-world experience. Prioritize lots of unsupervised free play, ideally with mixed ages if possible. Let them explore from that secure base you provide. Be a role model. Watch your own phone habits. Kids learn by watching you. Model focused attention when you're with them. Give responsibility. Even toddlers can help with simple chores. It builds that sense of competence and being a needed part of the family. Less screen time. Follow the guidelines. Basically none for under 2s, very limited for preschoolers. Don't use screens as a default pacifier. And absolutely no screens in the hour before bed. Protect that sleep.
Okay, early years. Play, role modeling, responsibility, minimal screens. What about elementary and middle school? You're just 6-13.
This is a critical period for building independence before the teen years. More real-world experience. Actively practice letting them out of your sight. Send them on errands. Encourage phone-free sleepovers. Have them walk or bike to school or nearby places. Use strategies like drive to 5, drop them 5 minutes away to walk the rest. Try building a playborhood. Coordinate with neighbors so kids know others will be outside playing at certain times. Less screen time. This is a big one. Delay the first smartphone until at least age 14, start of high school. This is Haidt's strongest recommendation for parents. Before that, maybe a basic phone or watch for call texts only. Limit total recreational screen time, prioritizing real-world activities and sleep.
That's a tough one for many parents.
It is, which is why collective action is so important. But it's crucial also. Watch for addiction signs. Know the red flags: irritability when off devices, anxiety, lying about use, losing interest in other things, withdrawal. If you see them, don't hesitate to implement a digital detox and seek help if needed. Delay social media accounts until 16. This aligns with raising the age of internet adulthood. Let them get through the most vulnerable phase of puberty before engaging with these powerful platforms. Passively watching YouTube is different from having an Instagram account driving constant comparison and interaction.
Okay, delay the smartphone, delay social media. What about teenagers, ages 14, 18? They likely have phones by then.
Yes, so the focus shifts. Increase real-world independence and responsibility. Don't do things for them they can do themselves. Rely on them for real contributions at home: cooking, cleaning, helping siblings. Strongly encourage part-time jobs. Learning from a boss who isn't mom or dad is invaluable. Find ways for them to mentor or lead younger kids: babysitting, coaching, camp counseling. It builds empathy and maturity. Bigger thrills in nature. Teenagers crave risk and excitement. Channel that into healthy outlets. Encourage challenging outdoor adventures: backpacking, climbing, canoeing. Programs like Outward Bound or NLS are fantastic for building real competence and resilience. Consider a gap year. That year between high school and whatever comes next can be transformative. Working, traveling, volunteering, it accelerates maturity and helps them figure out who they are before committing to a path like college. Online education. Talk to them directly about how these platforms are designed to hook them, the effects on mental health, the algorithms. Use resources like the Center for Humane Technology's Youth Toolkit to guide the conversation. And crucially, Haidt reminds parents: every choice you make contributes to the collective solution. When you delay the phone, you make it easier for the next parent. When you give your kid more freedom, you help shift the norm in your community. Acting together makes it easier for everyone.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's just undeniable. Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation paints a picture of a massive societal shift, the Great Rewiring, with truly profound consequences. That core problem, overprotection in the real world, underprotection in the virtual, is so clear.
And it's led directly to those 4 foundational harms reshaping a generation: social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction. These aren't small side effects. They're fundamental disruptions to healthy development.
But, and this is the critical takeaway we want you to hold on to, the message is ultimately one of hope and agency. We are not helpless. That it's too late feeling is beatable. We can, as Haidt says, bring childhood back to earth.
Absolutely. He ends with 2 simple, powerful calls to action: speak up and link up.
Yeah.
Speak up. Don't be a bystander. He references that classic psychology experiment where people didn't report smoke filling a room if others around them were passive. We need to break the silence. Share your concerns. Share the evidence. Talk to other parents, teachers, community leaders. Link up. Find your people. Join or form groups. Connect with organizations like Wait Until 8th, Let Grow, or local parent groups pushing for change. Collective action is how norms shift. Acting together provides support and amplifies your voice.
As you think about the future, maybe with things like AI, spatial computing, Apple's Vision Pro, for example, potentially making the virtual world even more immersive, more addictive, the urgency here just escalates, doesn't it? So the final question for you, the listener, is what actions will you take starting today to help bring childhood back to earth? Thank you for joining us today. Buy the book at the 1 Hour Guide website for more business insights.